Hello everyone. We're going to start this off with a quick preface to make sure we're all super clear. This video is an exercise in understanding and analyzing Ren's playstyle, teams, deaths, and kills to see what contributes to and detracts from his placements in the life series, alongside the narrative roles he plays and how those too impact his performance. This video is only interested in analysis relating to the topic of discussion and nothing else. Now that's done, welcome one and all to the first episode of my Life Series Contestant Analysis, to try and break down what helps and hinders each contestant within the Life Series, and see if we could speculate on the elusive dream team that could put the focus player in that highly coveted gold medal position. In this series, we'll be taking a look across each lifer's history with the series, focusing primarily on the main series and a Nice Life. While Nice Life is a special, its lifing time span and structure feel closer to a main series than a special, so it will be counted. While I may make reference to other series the creator has been in, these will only be for fun facts and side tangents, and not necessary viewings for contestant analysis. So, where do we start with Ren? Third Life, of course, needs no introduction if you're watching this video. Ren's dynamic with Martin as the Red King in the hand is iconic to the series at this point, but the reality of the dynamic is actually a bit more interesting than just the bloodthirsty king and his red right hand. As is well known by this point, Martin had always intended to betray Ren when they got to the final five, and throughout Third Life, Ren repeatedly takes the risk to put his life in Martin's hand despite not being sure that he can actually trust Martin, and funnily enough, being right that he can't, but not once here in the future series has Martin had a chance to commit that act of betrayal. The very beginning of their alliance is literally a business transaction, use of the enchantment table in exchange for marketing. This is the beginning of Ren's patterns with teams in the future Life series, one in which he devotes himself wholeheartedly, often at the risk of his own life, to the people he's decided to team with. He doesn't betray, he tells his teammates nearly all of his secrets, and is often the one his teammates collectively trust the most or gather around. He also has a record of having big late game team adjustments as the game goes on. While he will stick to his day one allies, in third, last, and past life he expands out his alliance when things come to a head. But more on that later. Focusing more on Third Life, Dogwarts as a faction was a very solid collection of players for the early series. Not counting Impulse, considering he was a traitor, the Dogwarts faction consisted of Ren, Martin, Skiz, Etho, and Bigby, with a much more temporary addition of Joel. This team is generally very well rounded. Martin is a feared PvPer, Bigby's social game continues to be nearly unmatched considering how long that alone keeps him alive in most series, and Etho's aura in the early seasons is well documented, as being intimidating for other players. Joel never really fought with them, and while Skiz may not have very good statistics in the series, his death in Third Life propels the Red Kingdom forward and to its fall as a driving motivation. So, what about Ren, their fearless leader? The important thing to understand about Ren as a player in Third Life, and a majority of the Life series as a whole, is that Ren is a remarkably defensive player. While his narrative choices and larger actions put forth a much more offensive front, Ren can play defensive very well when it comes to combat and strategy. When Red becomes the Ren King, he does not immediately go on an assault with the privilege of a Red name. Instead, this is when he does his recruiting, something to unify most factions of the Red Kingdom's banner, quite literally. His first death, the TNT minecart trap set by the Sand People, showcases this despite his death. Of the three victims of the trap, Ren is the furthest back, and the moment Jimmy starts trying to defuse it, Ren has his shield up and maintains a good few blocks of distance. Still not quite far enough, but considering Ren had no responsibility in activating the trap, was a good few blocks away, and was shielding himself, I think that proves how much his wariness kept him alive. And this from a trap that worked, not from any instances of him successfully evading a trapper situation through his defensive playstyle. Speaking of defensive, Ren's hotbar is very interesting. I'll discuss this more later, but here's a couple screenshots for his hotbars throughout the Third Life for you to ruminate on. Skipping out into second death for now, we'll be discussing narrative very soon. Once Red becomes red and draws lines in the sand, there's a couple of sessions of an almost cold war for Ren, where many offenses are played but very few to no lives are lost. This breaks when Ren knocks Cleo off the roof and kills them during the second face-off with Dead Bush Hill. Past this point, Ren rapidly climbs the ladder in terms of kills, ending the series with 6 kills, second only to Green's 8. For some people, this might be a surprise. There's a common misconception around Ren being not very good at PvP. The reality is that he's actually quite good, the only real point of drawback being that his hotbar is never arranged for PvP, but rather building and mining, and that he struggles to adapt under pressure. While you'd never know this from fan art, in Third Life, nearly all of Ren's kills are with a bow, which he proves incredibly effective with. Ren has genuinely incredible accuracy and amazing track record with the bow, but as time goes on and fights get more up close and personal in Life series, you see him use it less and less, which I think is a shame. Ren's sniping skills are genuinely incredibly impressive. I mean, just look at the shot Ren makes in episode 11 of his Third Life videos. That is a target he successfully hits, all while avoiding dying while lining up his shots, even with him at low ground and being a relatively sitting duck, which, hey, might say more about his opponents than him, but still. Ren's final death is rather interesting for multiple reasons. Narratively, of course, this is the routing of the two leaders of the Red Army, with Ren and Martin dying within moments of each other and exiting the series at the hand of Scar. But actually examining the fight and the chaos leading up to his death, there is a few key elements that are what really keep him from winning. First and foremost, at some point I couldn't find, Ren causes this Iron Golem to turn aggro onto him, with the Iron Golem's high damage and knockback. When Ren goes up the water this golem was in, he is flung around enough by it to seriously hinder his positioning in the fight with Scar and Rian. With it being notable that he came up right behind Scar in a perfect position to surprise him, had not been for the golem knocking him into the building next to him. In the process of fleeing both Scar and the golem, Ren is poisoned, assumably by an arrow. I haven't watched Scar's third life yet, and in the water. Is unable to escape Scar and dies, ending the third life series in seventh and third life, beat only by Martin, who dies a few moments later, and the illustrious Big B, who ends the series in fourth. Third Life is Ren's most iconic season, and it's hard not to see why. He and Martin brought forth one of the first major storylines in the Life series, and with his theatrics, skills, and willing sacrifice to bring forth Red Winter in a death game, heavily impacted how the Life series was seen by the fandom and played going forward, towing the line of various rules of the game specifically for the purpose of the narrative he wanted to follow. Now, let's move on to discussing Last Life. The faction breakdown of the Forest Fairies is perhaps one of the most interesting alliance breakdowns in the entire Leaf series history, as basically every death faced by each member of the Fairy Fort steadily broke down the trust and bonds formed by the faction. Before we dive into that, though, let's turn back to how Ren is involved with the Forest Fairies. Ren is actually the last to join the Forest Fairies, starting the series of two lives, the lowest possible role shared by Green, Jimmy, Cleo, and Scott. Huh. Ren joins the Forest Fairies by swearing allegiance to Lizzie in exchange for a life in some netherworm, but is very noticeably, and largely due to his own lateness, separate from the core trio. Don't just take my word for it. If you look up fan art of the Forest Fairies, a majority of the time, if the Forest Fairies are given a unifying trait, for example insect wings, Ren will either be lacking that trait or have a noticeably different variant than the others. There's actually a specific interaction that you only get the full context for in Bigby's episode 3 of Last Life. It did some snooping, because once the Boogeyman announcement sounds, Ren runs off, and you can faintly hear Cleo talking. It's not in Cleo's ep, and Lizzie prefers shorter episodes, so it was cut there. But in Bigby's ep, we get the full context, where they discuss that with Ren running off right before the Boogeyman announcement to build his new base across the fort, if he is the Boogeyman, they say that only Lizzie would be safe. Ren won't break his vow to her, but he might kill Cleo or Bigby. And then in the next episode, he tells them all of them immediately when he is the Boogie. Between that, though, Ren spends the life Lizzie gave him on Scar to ensure Scar will not hurt him the rest of Last Life. True to his word, Scar doesn't hurt him for the rest of the series. When he comes back and tells the Forest Fairies, they're obviously not a huge fan of Ren selling away the life Lizzie gave him, but Cleo tells him he can stay, and this kindness is echoed after Cleo leaves the Forest Fairies when Big B kills them. Cleo tells Ren that he's the one person she isn't mad at, and despite the breakdown of the Forest Fairies, they remain on good terms until near the end of the season. Ren and Martin also team up again, of course, with Martin providing him a life in exchange for a secret alliance, which then envelops Lizzie and Bigby in the wake of the breakdown of the Forest Fairies. Over the course of the following sessions, Lizzie and Bigby both turn red and break from the Shadow Alliance, leaving only Ren and Martin, with Ren having outlasted his very first team, as the last one still above Red, despite being the last to join. This is the first season where Martin dies before Ren, at a third, with Ren dying in second, the last of both of his alliances. While Ren was loyal to his teammates unwaveringly throughout Last Life, even Red Life Lizzie praising his loyalty in Episode 7, the harsher restrictions around Ren being unable to team with the Yellow and Green Lives led to irrevocable breakdowns of alliances, with himself even helping Cleo kill Bigby and then killing Cleo for Bigby. Wow, man. Outside of that, Ren continues to be generally a very defensive and paranoid player. Various highlights, like the trap that brought him to Yellow in Third Life. Ren is shielding the trap. Red Pearl sets assuming it's a trap, but isn't lucky enough to get out before it's too late. He buys safety from Scar and forgoes a secret alliance and forges a secret alliance with Armorin, which ends up becoming clutch. As well, while he had a secret chest in Third Life, Ren actually makes like at least 3 secret chests in the Last Life, maybe more. Ren's preparedness and defensive playstyle actually also plays into his kills, specifically 2 near the end of Last Life in his Boogeyman kill. Ren's boogie kill of Skiz is just extremely solid. While Ren has said he dislikes being the boogie, he proves pretty effective. He's an excellent actor, and his trap is well built and works perfectly. This is also the first season with the Boogeyman mechanic, though, so it's not exactly especially notable as a good trap like Pearl's Dance Club in this season, and later season kills like King of the Ladder. Between Ren's boogie kill and taking Skizz out of the series, Ren doesn't actually kill or even assist in a single kill. Him taking Skizz out of the series is also quite a feat. Ren defends himself from Impulse and Skizz for an impressive amount of time before Scott and Cleo come to save him, at one point dropping to 1 heart before gappling and surviving long enough for Cleo and Scott to come by, at which point he uses his bow skills to take Skizz out of the series. A skill I've not yet mentioned that Ren utilizes in his next kill is that Ren is a strategist and a good one. He knows how to make a plan, commit to it, and more often than not, his plans work. They may end up with different people dead than intended or not quite hit the goal mark, but the gist of his plans nearly always work, and he always puts the time to make it happen. Ren intentionally serves as bait, using a Bubble Vader to hide Etho and Cleo so that when the Reds come to attack him, they can use defensive Ren / self-defense to take them out. And this plan worked perfectly. Cleo eliminates Big B and Ren eliminates Scar within moments of each other, with both surviving players on yellow and Etho not dying at all. Once he's red, Ren is swift to team up with the Reds to take Cleo down to red, and while it's a good kill, it's ultimately unnotable. Cleo's facing a 3v1 and a bunch of wolves. If it wasn't Ren, it would have been any of them. Scott and Ren team up to eliminate Joel, with Ren getting a majority of the hits in for the first half of the assault, with a very good Ender Pearl throw before Scott finishes him off, all through swordplay. Finally, the deathmatch. For the purposes of just discussing Ren's kills, Ren kills Pearl with Scott, and Scott immediately turning to betray him at 31:30 in his last life finale. A zombie assisted by Scott finally kills Ren 6.5 minutes later at 38 minutes, with no intentional break in between. If that alone doesn't tell you just how good Ren is at surviving, let's actually take a full look at his last life deaths. As we discussed earlier, Ren starts with 2 lives, and despite his life trading, does not lose a life through traps, accidents, or combats until session 8, when Joel and Green surprise him while collecting apples. He gets stuck in a hole pretty quickly and is fast defeated. While Ren could have tried to lava bucket them, the combo of Joel, Green, and several zombies meant that basically the moment he realized they were targeting him, it was too late. Back down to 2 lives, his following deaths are Pearl's Big Man kill, which we already discussed with him really losing the game while not winning despite his defensive maneuvers, which leaves a kill that took him out of the series. As I mentioned earlier, Ren spends over 6 minutes fleeing from Scott, and when he and Scott enter their final showdown, Ren is hit by a very well-timed weakness potion from Scott, which he doesn't notice, leaving him entirely vulnerable the moment he decides to turn around and fight. Had Ren noticed the weakness potion, given his track record, I fully believe Ren could have run out the weakness timer and gone back for another round and possibly won, but without noticing the potion's effects, he had no shot at defeating Scott in battle. Even in the after-death banter at the end of his last life video, Joel and Green marvel at just how much he survived before finally going down, which I think is a real testament to just how strong Ren's skills are when he's put on the defensive. Ultimately, I think Ren's last life series is heavily overlooked. Given it came out after Third Life, it makes sense, but alongside him getting second overall, the narrative of the breakdown of the forest fairies and then the further splitting of the shadow lines, with Ren spending most of the last couple seasons teamed with Cleo and Etho, is a situation that is heavily unexplored. Had Ren won, maybe it wouldn't be so overlooked, but Ren didn't win Third Life and still got quite popular over it, landing worse in total rankings than he did here, and Scott absolutely worked hard for his win. Those 2 sections were long, but thankfully or not, we have Double Life here to shorten things up. Double Life, by its very nature, was always going to be a shorter season. 3 sessions shorter than Last Life, with the duos having 3 lives each. It was pretty clear from the start how quickly people would be dropping. Ren's teammate and soulmate this season is Big B, which is honestly pretty great for Ren. He and Big B last along to the Forest Fairies and have great chemistry. And where Ren struggles in certain social aspects of the Life series, Ren's Big B's social strategies have been his biggest strength since day 1. Ren ends up mostly calling the shots for the majority of their time in Double Life, so it may not be the biggest surprise that they have a bit of a dispute once Baby gets a secret admirer letter from his secret soulbound. Funnily enough, Ren never actually learns the identity of Big B's secret soulmate during Double Life. Instead, secret soulmate takes Ren and Big B out of the series, so despite this, the two take steps to repair things through Scott's relationship branch, and while their departure from the series is quite sudden, they end things on a good note. Ren also even tells Big B about his brief stint with the Broken Hearts Club. Personally, Ren's most iconic moment this season, and testament to earlier sessions of his preparedness, is the zombie pool party. He and Big B devote basically an entire session to pulling it off, and while the zombies themselves don't get the kill, this being Ren's only kill this season, it's an extremely fun and showy one that I think was well worth the effort and is super underappreciated. Plus, while logistically the zombies that killed Green and Scar later on were likely not these zombies, it is fun to imagine they could have somehow wound up in that hole. As for his deaths, well, this is where we're going to talk a little about the role Ren plays narratively in Double Life. An interesting aspect of Ren's early seasons of the Life series is that he vacillates between his generally very sweet, well-meaning, anxious demeanor with these sharp presentations where he plays mean, detesting other factions' outsiders, driving hard lines in the sand between him and other factions, and intentionally being a bit of a jerk. This is good. Ren being able to play the bad guy, regardless of whether he expresses regret or not, further stokes rivalries and fun, showy fights. Double Life is where this reaches its pinnacle. Ren supplies Pearl with a dog that will help make her future dog army that helps her win the season. And when this exchange leads to the entire accidental death for meeting the Enderman's gaze and his failure to react properly in time, Ren goes all in on invoking Pearl as a villain. This risk ends up making Double Life, and especially Pearl's arc within, one of the most entertaining watches of the Life series. With Pearl painted as the crazy villain by all those around her, watching her own perspective and sympathizing with her makes her win so rewarding. While Ren tells Bigby he feels bad about it moments after she leaves, it's an excellent narrative strike that really helps support Pearl's own narrative that season. Ren's second death is Bigby, so we'll ignore that and return to it in Bigby's video. His third death, however, really, there was nothing Ryan could have done, and that's okay. The stalactite kill from Green is so perfectly timed and executed that there's really no point in raising ifs or buts. It's perfectly timed good luck, paying off immediately, and is exceptionally cool. That's that. Ren is largely absent from Limited Life and Secret Life, but he does surface Tango's substitute during a session of Secret Life. While this ultimately doesn't tell us much about Ren as a contestant, it is worth noting that he continues picking up on habits we've discussed previously. He commits to an idea to make a redstone machine and does it, and is the only substitute in the entire series to survive the session he filled in for, having even survived on one heart. And this is a session with the Warden and Wither fight. Next up, Wildlife. We'll be saving a certain chimeric elephant for last, so bear with me. Let's talk about Ren's kills first. The snail episode is one we'll be discussing a lot more later, but it's not news to say that it really heavily changes a lot of how the scoreboard looks in terms of lives, and over the course of the session, the stress kind of cracks Ren, as well as bringing him to yellow. We're in Wildlife that give him license to kill dark green names. As such, he actually approaches Green, Skiz, and Mumbo directly, planning to kill someone. Well, the plan is initially to have a snail leap at someone trapped in cobwebs. When Impulse gets out of the cobwebs, Ren just resorts to hunting him down and slaying him. While it's by far one of the shakiest plans Ren has made and followed through on, considering the snail didn't even get the kill, Ren does successfully take Impulse down entirely on his own, and then feels immensely bad about it right after. His next kill in the same episode is actually pretty fun, as it's a sort of a better version of his failed snail trap for Impulse. He and Martin find a snail, Ren splashes it with an instant pot, and it let it loose. And this ends up killing Scar. This was ultimately a prank gone wrong. It's notable for being one of Ren's sneakiest kills to date and very out of his usual wheelhouse. Ren does not like to surprise kill people. There's going to be a whole section later where I talk about a snail episode and what it does to Ren specifically. His kill on Gem is really just him winning the lottery of people trying to kill Gem and ultimately getting the credit, and then his kill on B-Dubs, well, it's actually intended for Tango. There's a certain habit about adding crystal explosions that Ren doesn't really realize now or during past life. They do more damage to people whose feet are on the same level as the crystal, so even if someone is closer, if they are a step below, say on the same level as the obsidian block, they'll take less damage than someone a little further away on the same level. Obviously, this is one of Ren's best instinctive kills. He places it right next to Tango and activates it immediately, but without blowing himself up. It's almost perfect, just ever so slightly isn't. Ren's deaths are, again, largely a case of bad luck on a large scale. He starts to death one during the food wildcard, which isn't unique to him, and then dies 4 times during the snail episode, 3 of them being snails, and 1 being... Okay, let's talk about the snail episode. For Ren specifically, the snail episode is especially a nightmare. While the snail episode is deadly to a lot of the server, for Ren it goes beyond just being deadly to actively undermining him the entire session. He spends half the session digging up Redwood Mound to find his horse, cannot plan or focus on anything long term due to the snail looming over his shoulder, and otherwise spends the session as absolutely stressed mess, which is kryptonite to Ren. Ren is someone who does a really good job preparing and playing defensively. But as pointed out by Martin during Wildlife, everything Ren does to prepare is either useless for next wildcard or blows up in his face. And the snail episode is the epitome of that. On top of the 3 deaths via snail taking him off guard, Ren even chooses to tie Jimmy to a certain alliance and try and see if dying would get rid of the snail. This, unfortunately, doesn't work. Alongside him killing both Impulse and Scar this session, for Ren not being a red life, this is one of the bloodiest sessions he's ever had, with himself and others. Snails. Also, a brief side note I wasn't sure where to put. Despite how much the snail episode got him, Ren remains very good at surviving running away from things. In the trivia bot episode, he's the only one out of himself, Skiz, Jimmy, and Martin to survive when he gets a question wrong and a Ravager spawns on his tower. Similarly, near the end of episode 7, he water bucket clutches just to show off to Lizzie. Back to his deaths. Mumbo uses an end crystal the right way as a zombie and kills himself and Ren extremely quickly, with Ren getting out a greeting right before he dies. Mumbo also arrives with Ren facing away, so ultimately Ren just wasn't aware enough of Mumbo to survive this one, largely due to being taken so off guard. Ren actually dies from Mumbo again in that same session right at the very end. Ren had at that point basically fully checked out of the life series mode, which I can't truly blame him for as he was surrounded by Reds and just chatting since the session was about to end. So when he started getting attacked, he was so bamboozled. He kind of just stood there and watched it happen. Not a great attempt at survival, but it's hard to ask a man in that position to not let his guard down. Ren's final death is at the hands of Joel, earning him third place. Similar to third life, Ren's death is in part due to poison. He and Joel have a really solid fight. Ren gets some solid swings in after cobwebbing himself and Joel. And when he has an easy shot to Pearl out, he hesitates, gets poisoned, turns around, and loses the opportunity to escape and regroup. When he does Pearl, Joel and the poison have brought him so low that the fall kills him before he can escape. With both of his deaths where he was in the top 3, Ren ultimately fails due to the windows he fails to take properly, choosing to attack Scott at the exact wrong moment and choosing to flee Joel only when it was too late. Ren varies between how good he is under pressure sometimes, like when checking Scott's trapped base in Last Life, he panics and puts his HUD away while exploding. Though he didn't die then. Other times he can make the right decision on a dime to move forward in the game. Good gapples, water buckets, and key kills. These windows, however, are ones he was unfortunate enough to not properly see in time, which ends up being his ruination. Now, let's talk narrative and teams. From the very beginning of Session 1, he and Martin are teamed. There is no debate, no waiting, they ally from the very start. Because of this, Ren spends the season with basically no other allies. While he has a lot of good interactions with others, Martin has played a much more feisty and harsher game, so Ren is mostly repairing relationships Martin hurts with the other factions. And when Martin dies, while Ren is transformed into him near the end of Episode 7, this propels Ren further into his most alienating decision in the entire series, Mart Ren. Narratively, Mart Ren is phenomenal. It is an absolute shot in the dark to do something crazy from the unique circumstances he's been provided, intentionally driving others away through a malformed, twisted fusion of himself and Martin, which, when Ren interacts with zombie henchman Martin, is essentially and purposefully ignored and discarded by zombie henchman Martin, whose only allegiance is to whoever summoned him. It feeds back into Ren's isolation perfectly, divorcing him from most of the server even further by having even Martin himself basically ignore the gesture and say he put him out of his misery. Most of the server is visibly creeped out by Mart Ren, but despite this, the G's do take him in, only for him to outlive all of them. But that alliance is only the last session and incredibly short-lived, with the vantage point of the mountain giving Joel a huge advantage to eliminating the rest of the cast. This is the smallest team Ren has ever had, it's just him and Martin, and it's the second best he's ever placed a third. Huh. The final main series entry we'll be taking a look at today is Past Life, where he placed his worst at 15th, eliminating him second out of the entire cast, and after his teammates Tango. So, what happened? First, his team. For the first time since Last Life, Ren's teammates are entirely people he's never teamed with, Tango and Impulse. Tango, while a very skilled redstoner and game designer, has never played particularly high in the Life series, and in this season especially, he comes dead last, being eliminated only 5 sessions into an 8-session season due to a creeper. Impulse, however, is pretty solid. He's rather underrated, often suffering from being targeted at random, see Ren's earlier kill, but reaching as high as second place in limited life with Martin and Scott, 2 very strong PvP players. Our team is formed out of convenience, with Ren wanting to build a pyramid, stumbling across Impulse and Tango, who wanted to make bread. Impulse and Tango, learning Ren has no team, invite him to form the Gluten Guys, and with their bread, actually form a whole cornerstone alliance with the Lost Generation and the Rejects, which gives them a solid leg up. But despite such a huge alliance, these things do not go well for the Gluten Guys. Ren is the inaugural death of this faction, even, dying to the poor, unfortunate testing of how fall damage works in the older versions of water. I love Ren. I can't defend this. The next one is a similar story, with our dearly beloved King of the Ladder. Everyone who died on King of the Ladder. On the one hand, this is the most obvious death trap in the world. On the other hand, it's Etha running King of the Ladder, and basically everyone decided to get in on it. Hard to turn your nose up at that. Though I will note that Ren straight up says that it's trapped and knows Etha is lying, and he still dies to it, so. The Pokeball Improv Boogie kill is another case of Ren being around a trap instead of knowing it's a trap, defending himself and still dying anyway. This is like the third time this exact situation has happened. He very nearly survives this one too, but just barely doesn't. Meanwhile, Tango's failing to Boogeyman, which gets him publicly executed in the next session and sent right off the map at last place. Even at the funeral, he isn't safe. He gets boogied again by Scar and Pearl, when Scar opens the trap chest set up for Tango's funeral, entirely outside of his control, and then Impulse's own trap kills him in Impulse. It's a dark, dark day for Ren. And finally, look. Ren tried several different times to invade the village lighthouse. He did it rather successfully, sneaking in. He was caught most of the time, but he kept not doing anything while he was in there. He wouldn't destroy their stuff, couldn't find an opportunity to kill, and the lighthouse had gone under so many assaults already at that point. I don't recall who said it or where it was said, so don't take this as fact, but from what I recall, everyone kind of knew they'd be sending someone on a suicide mission to try and take the lighthouse to fill it with lava. From my own perspective, it looked like those around him, Impulse, Cleo, Martin, intended for it to be a confidence boost. Martin told Ren he was pretty sure it wasn't trapped. In reality, however, it was, and it eliminated Ren at 15th. For a while there, Impulse and Ren do team up with Martin and Cleo has rarely been one of the few people Ren has always been able to rely on with other teams to break down since Last Life. Working with them in the Last Life despite the breakdown of the Forest Fairies, friendly with him in Double Life, taking him in as Martin in Wild Life, working with him again in Past Life. Outside of Martin, Ren's most consistent ally has been Cleo, despite them only starting the season team together in Last Life. Ren only got one kill in Past Life, killing Cleo, because of that same misunderstanding about End crystals while trying to kill Etho. As of the current Life Series entries, Ren ends in a pretty sad spot, sacrificed by his teammates with more lives, killed by his teammates in poor decision making for most of his deaths, and ultimately in the bottom two. One entry left for our study, and then we'll talk extra details, results, and final thoughts. Nice Life is actually quite the upgrade for Ren from how poorly Past Life went. The first session of Nice Life is very bloody overall, with pretty much the entire cast being knocked down to red or yellow, befitting a special. As is nature of the Nice Life mechanics, when Ren is marked as a purple name, he's hunted down and slaughtered, with Jimmy specifically taking the kill credit. This is actually foundational to his alliance with Pearl and Cleo as the Purple Defense God, which, well, they didn't really defend Purples anymore after that point, but the important part is that this is Ren's first time allying with Pearl and Cleo officially, having only allied with Pearl as Mart Ren near the end of Wild Life and Cleo in Last Life, and again allied as Mart Ren in Wild Life. And again, also in Past Life. Once again, he is swarmed when he gets marked on by the naughty list a second time during Session 2, and then smashed by Joel with a mace while distracted during Session 2 as well. To be fair, he stood very still for a long while, just talking to Jimmy and Scott, so ripe for the picking. Despite this, the bloodbath of the final fight of Nice Life of the Red Winter shows once again how capable Ren can be, with him and Martin once more becoming the Red King in hand, allying with Gem, Green, and Cleo, the two teams break out into all-out war. Ren once more steps up his violence, having been passive the entire game, minus 2 naughty lift assists, he now solidly goes on the offensive, killing Big B with Gem and going all in against Scott and Joel. Ultimately, the two fall within a second of each other, held by Joel's dogs, but it marks Ren's third in the finale of Nice Life, causing him to once again lose an entry to the Life Series in third place where Joel won first. With our final bit of data accounted for, let's talk about the extra bits that are difficult to really quantify or define. Firstly, remember when I mentioned Ren's hotbar? This is actually something showcased very recently in Mystery Hermit for 2026 Gamers Outreach. Ren, like Etho, plays with his building tool in his first two slots, then his sword/axe, then his bow. This is far from a bad thing, but it's a good reminder of just how long Ren has been playing Minecraft. And while Etho has received a joking reputation about being washed up with combat changes from the combat update, Ren has adapted without ever changing his hotbar layout, which I have to assume how long they've played is why their hotbars look like this. I haven't played that long either. I may be wrong. Secondly, Ren is a sweetheart. Look, I'm trying to be objective here, but if you watch any of Ren's videos himself and not just from external POVs, unless you're like Martin, Ren is really a sweetheart. Even when he does kill someone or intentionally acts malicious to push a story along, he's often incredibly apologetic. Even as the Red King, whose role he played was to be a bloodthirsty king, still had lines about the blood in his eyes blinding him. After Ren returns to the series in Wild Life, he is notably way less willing to use those malicious acts to push stories along. I think the decision has been pretty good for him. While Past Life was a rough season for him, Ren being nicer has generally been great for his longevity in the game, regardless of how well received it is. Ren sticks to his allies like glue, and even in future games, he's often incredibly reticent to attack allies at any former season. I don't really mention it, but regardless of Ren and Big B not teaming outside of Last and Double Life, Ren is always really friendly with Big B and always views him as an ally, never willingly turning on him. As well, there was also Vampires SMP, which is not really part of the series we're looking at, but is worth noting for me personally as seemingly when he put his tendency to have his character view other groups as outsiders to bed, as it was the downfall of his character in Vampires SMP. Now then, what does all of this say? What keeps him back from winning? What does it take for Ren to win? First and foremost, just to reiterate, this is all based on hypothetical opinion and my own judgment of Ren's skill set. Moving past that, let's break this down one step at a time. What's the most consistent record for Ren's teams and alliances where he lasts the top rankings? Rather interestingly, despite how social and kind Ren is, Ren's best history with his teams has been when those teams have broken down. The Forest Fairies implode and the Shadow Alliance falls apart in its wake, and Ren makes it to second. Teamed only with Martin in Wild Life, Martin dies a session before the finale, and Martin struggles to find anyone who'll accept him until the very end. And though he does focus on supporting them first and foremost, he still outlasts them. In Nice Life, he outlasts Pearl and Cleo, Pearl before the finale, and Cleo he beats by 6 placements. Also, interestingly, he and Martin have traded who survives the other in every full season Ren's been in. Martin survives him in third life for a few seconds, and Martin survived him in last life. Martin survived him in double life, then Ren survived him in wild life. Martin survived him in past life, and, well, for now, Ren survived him by like half a second in ice life. That's just fun coincidence, though. Now, for his playstyle, Ren is actually pretty strong. While he definitely has this case of panicking when he's not properly prepared to be in a dangerous situation, when he is, Ren is an incredibly strong survivor and fighter. His sniping skills remain unmatched, and I'd love to see them return. And again, Ren survives running from Scott for 6.5 minutes in the last life finale before the weakness potion finally lets Scott get the upper hand. Ultimately, the only thing holding back his fighting skills is his lack of confidence. When he's committed to a plan, he can really show up. When he isn't committed, isn't confident, or doesn't have someone telling him what to do, his confidence shakes and can stumble hard. Plus, sometimes he just makes mistakes because he's human. Those windows I mentioned in Wildlife and Last Life, those are incredibly easy mistakes to make, especially when you have to balance surviving versus what's more interesting as a content creator. Ren running forever doesn't make as good content as turning around and fighting, and he knows that. And finally, a lot of what kills Ren in his worst seasons and worst performances is bad luck and not thinking things through. Kicking the ladder, falling into water, snails, starving to death, a lucky dripstone spike. These aren't signs of a bad player or someone who's always taking risks. This shows me that Ren suffers from something as simple as bad luck and having fun playing Minecraft, so I'm really not here to blame him for that. Like, looking at the winnings and failings of players like Green, Martin, and Joel, in past life Green was so desperate for the win, he literally killed his own teammate and lost either of them the chance to win. Martin's such a famous backstabber that all of his teammates besides Ren hold him at arm's length, and he still intended to betray Ren, he just never got the chance to really have this big show of it. Joel's completely reckless, and while it has worked wonders for him, it's also majorly screwed him over half the time with a very shaky history with teams. They're having fun, so none of these are bad traits. They're fun to watch, I imagine they're fun to play, but Ren clearly doesn't want to play ruthless, so there's no point engaging with that as a method of seeing what it could take for him to win. So with that in mind, what would? What would it take for him to win? For one, Ren needs to start with a team, probably a small team, and lose them. Who the team should be is a harder question. It needs to be people who can last. I love the Gloon guys, but Tango and Impulse's track records are not fantastic. I personally suggest Scott, Pearl, and Gem as potential teammates. I am shocked Scott and Ren have never teamed. He and Pearl are just lovely people, and Gem playing the proverbial straight man to Ren's campy nonsense sounds delightful. Plus, she has the skill to back it up and will be vital in pushing Ren to be more willing to kill, because while he might not enjoy being ruthless, he will do what his team asks of him. As well, Scott and Pearl got their wins and would be comfortable sacrificing themselves for the other two most likely. Scott has sacrificed himself repeatedly since he won, and Pearl, while she would deserve another win like Scott as well, is more likely to want to give someone else a shot at the crown, even offering the same thing to Scar in Secret Life to die so that he could win, and in a way that didn't end up happening. While Martin would also be a good candidate, everyone and their mother knows that if Martin and Ren reach top 3, Martin will betray Ren, and Ren won't fight back, so Martin has to die first. I also love another official Cleo team up, but Cleo, Pearl, and Scott have teamed up a lot. Get a bit of variety in there. Ren also needs to start using bows again. I'm not kidding. He's incredibly good with a bow, and I don't think he realizes it. Giving this man a sniper tower and some company to cheer him on and push him to be some more ruthless, and he can clean out. Finally, Ren just needs confidence. That's part of why I think Scott, Pearl, or Gem can be such good teammates. Gem will push Ren to do more, and if it involves avenging or honoring another player like Scott or Pearl, Ren will absolutely show up to carry their name. I honestly believe Ren has it already in him to win a Life Series entry. He doesn't need a total overhaul, he doesn't need to heavily change his playstyle, he just needs a team that knows how to support him and the right dominoes to fall for him to be left alone with the bodies of his fallen friends to avenge. And hey, he can always just incorporate their DNA into his again if that helps.